Hey guys, it's Matt Haycox here, and today I am trying some new technology, making the most of the corona crisis to further my knowledge with all things tech. I've come to terms with Zoom, and I'm now using StreamYard, I think it's called. But we're trying to keep the podcast moving, trying to keep the quantity of content coming out to you guys. So today I have got with me James Tucker. And James is a tech expert and set up a tech company to disrupt the archaic mortgage sourcing industry. Sounds very fancy and very boring, but I assure you it's super interesting. James is going to make it sound even more interesting, but more importantly, it affects all of us, whether we're buying, selling, business owners, employees, or renters. And James has got some really interesting things to talk about, both around building his company, running a tech business in the UK, and also the state of the mortgage and the property market in general. So it's great to have him here. You guys should really make the most of being able to ask him some questions while this is live. James, thanks for joining me, buddy.
You're very welcome, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Do you want to do you want to give us a little bit of background that I haven't covered, and kind of tell us how you got to where you are today, and what initially sparked your interest in this area?
Yeah, absolutely. So I used to work in venture capital, private equity, a little bit like yourself. And back in 2012, 2013, we were looking at a range of different businesses in different markets, in education, in finance, in recruitment as well, and trying to identify opportunities where we felt the incumbent players in that market, and in particular, the impact of those incumbent players upon the ultimate end customer, wasn't really working in the way that potentially it could do if you adopted modern technology. So one of the areas that we looked at was the mortgage industry. And I think people who are familiar with getting a mortgage back, 5, 6, 7 years ago now, as in fairness, it's not that dissimilar today in some respects. You'd sit through a 2 or 3 hour meeting with your mortgage broker. You'd wait 2 weeks to hear from the bank as to whether or not you're going to say yes. It was an incredibly laborious, time consuming and very frustrating process. And a lot of that wasn't necessarily to do with the person you were sat in front of. It was to do with the technology in the banks, enable them to make decisions around lending. And it was also to do with the technology that the brokers themselves were using to try and find the right product for you. So what we did initially was to build what was ultimately a search engine for mortgages, if you like, a way that a broker or indeed a customer themselves could go on and enter information about themselves, which would enable them to see what mortgages they're likely to be eligible for, and therefore what mortgages they're likely to ultimately get to help them buy that property they're keen to buy. And Matt, that's where we started off.
Okay. And so as the man on the street who is out there looking to get a mortgage, he would never actually come across your product, probably, would he?
No, he wouldn't. The majority of the services that we provide are provided directly to the mortgage brokers themselves, but also to the lenders too. We do work with a number of the comparison sites, so we tend to provide the back-end technology to those sites. So you may have some customers who go on the likes of USwitch, places like that. They use the search services on those sites for mortgages. That's powered by ourselves, but they wouldn't necessarily know that we're there. It's clearly the consumer-facing brand of the likes of USwitch that the customer's familiar with.
What kind of tips have you got for somebody who's out there looking to get a mortgage, who is using a mortgage broker? Because one of the things I often talk about is that people have almost like blind faith and the utmost respect for their lawyers, for their accountants, for the people in professional services, because I think there's almost this natural preconception, I would say misconception, that because someone has some letters after the name or has achieved a certificate, that they are the font of knowledge for that particular area. And I'm a big advocate for the fact that it's a very dangerous route to go down, with a lawyer, with an accountant, not having at least some degree of high level knowledge yourself, to be able to interact in a conversation with them. And I would assume that same logic applies to a mortgage broker. I mean, whilst an end user may not actually get to access your product or know much about it, are there any ways that they could have extra knowledge to know that their mortgage broker really is doing everything possible to get them the right product, and they're not getting the wool pulled over their eyes?
Yeah, so I think there's two things that every customer can do, obviously, to help themselves in this process. And number one, as you say, Matt, is to familiarize yourself a little bit with what products are out there, what the best rates are, what the criteria is for those products, and to what extent you may or may not be eligible for them, based upon what you can find on the likes of Money Supermarket, Uswitch, etc. The second thing you can do is obviously use review sites like Trustpilot. So if you're looking at using a mortgage broker, do some research on that individual, that firm. Try and find somebody that's got great reviews before you talk to them, and understand a little bit of background about them. But I would say, though, and as a business, and for me personally, this is true, we're very big advocates of advice. And I think if you look at the complexity of circumstances that we see now in the general populace in the UK, particularly the self-employed, contractors, people with adverse credit, getting advice in those circumstances is really, really important. And there are far more important things potentially in selecting the right product than just the rate. There's a lot of other factors that come in, and that's where if you can find yourself a really great broker, they'll give you that extra service and they'll really help you find the right product and save you money in the long term.
Okay, fantastic. And where is the UK mortgage market at right now? I mean, and probably I'll ask you that question both. Where is it a month ago, and where is it now after the Corona crisis is starting to kick in?
So about a month ago, we were reporting, and most of our firms were reporting, a record first quarter. I think we were looking at some very significant full year lending figures for the wider market. Now, we obviously track all the activity in our system. Over the course of the past month, we've seen a 40% decline in search volumes for our broker users. That's a very significant drop, but we've not seen anything like that before. Even in 2008, that decline was never that severe, and it certainly didn't come at the pace that it's come this time. That being said, remortgage is still holding up very well. So we've seen a big swing from clearly a lot of purchase business being done. Typically, that's 55% of the market. Now you're seeing about 75% of searches are all to do with remortgages. So I think the mortgage market in respect of lenders and brokers has switched to where the opportunity to service customers still is, which is in the remortgage and product transfer space. Clearly, the purchase space right now is very challenging. You can't view a house, you can't see your estate agent, you can't get a valuation done on that property. It's going to be very difficult to complete that transaction. But the market is holding up at a reasonable level now.
Well, that's what I was going to come on to, really, insofar as purchase or remortgage. Ultimately, how is that case going to get transacted? I mean, obviously, my day job is in the commercial mortgage space. In the commercial finance space, a lot of which includes bridging finance, and a lot of the lenders that I either work with or who may be my peers are moving to the likes of desktop valuations, obviously, lower loan to values, and all kinds of other things, such as working on FaceTime independent legal advice, all I guess all workarounds. But but they are, I wouldn't say they're workarounds in its entirety. It's a way to kind of keep the wheels moving to a degree, but but certainly not anything like the pace it was beforehand. I mean, are some of these techniques moving into the mainstream residential mortgage market, or are you actually just really seeing it on hold, that that no one is able to transact until this problem is over and lockdown's finished?
I think the lenders have woken up to the fact that AVMs, which is automated valuations, and desktop valuations, if those are implemented in their businesses successfully, that can provide a good option for them at this time. I think part of the challenge they've got right now, and we all have ultimately, is it's very difficult to gauge where the property market is going to land in terms of the potential decrease in value. So if you're looking, for example, at an automated valuation model, that model was fantastic a month ago. In the coronavirus environment, it's very difficult to gauge whether that model is now 5%, 10%, 20% out. So I think lenders are moving in that direction and looking to utilize those solutions more. But at the same time, they'll have to balance that with the additional risk that they then may be taking by moving to more of an automated valuation model.
Okay, and so I'm just looking in the comment box as well. While we're doing this, James Clink saying, exactly the trouble I'm having with my mortgage application at the moment. Surveyors not doing inspections or willing to do desktops. I mean, have you actually seen decreases in valuations happen yet, or are you just actually not seeing the valuations happen full stop?
We've seen a very significant decrease in valuation. So we've got relationships across the industry with the likes of Home Track, Legal and General Surveyors. We can see very clearly ourselves from the conversation we've had with them that those guys simply are not able to go out there and do surveys right now. So sorry, go on, Matt.
probably didn't ask my question properly. What I meant is, are you actually seeing a physical drop in value in the price of valuations, the property rather?
The answer is no, not yet. I think where people are transacting at the moment and they've got a deal going through that perhaps they started a month or two ago, which is still in the process. Clearly, there's question marks over to whether or not people should go through with that deal. And I think we're seeing some deals drop off from the brokers that we've been speaking to. But in the main, given that your property is ultimately a long-term purchase, I think the majority of advice that's still coming out from the market is, look, if you're confident that you can afford the mortgage you're taking out and the property is the property that you want, whether the short-term dip is 5 or 10% in value, or maybe it's nothing, ultimately won't make that much difference to you if you're viewing this as a 20-25-year purchase. Clearly, if it's a one-year deal and you're looking to sell the property very quickly, well, then you've got to consider what your margin is, what your profit opportunity is, and whether now is the right time to be doing that deal.
Okay, fantastic. I want to go and talk about a few more generic things now, really, to do with you growing your business. And I guess the first thing for me is how have you found just the actual concept of growing a tech company in today's world, scaling up to the 50 employees that you've got now, and what kind of pitfalls and problems you've found along the way, and what advice you've got for our listener base of how to overcome that themselves.
How long have you got? So I think the first thing I'd have to confess on is that I'm not the tech genius in all of this. So I'm very lucky. I've got a great team behind me, and we've got a fantastic team.
I've announced you as a tech genius 3 or 4 times. You should just roll with it.
By comparison, Matt, I might be, but not as so far as it comes to writing code. So the first thing you do if you're going to build a tech business, you've got to make sure that the people you're working with, from a tech perspective, if you're not the tech person, are absolutely as good as you can find, and they completely know what you're doing, and also that they really buy into what it is you're trying to achieve. There's a lot of developers in the market right now, and it's very easy to recruit them. But finding people who really buy into your mission as a business is something very different. So our CTO, Paul, and I, we founded the business together 5.5 years ago. He's been here from the outset. So with his technical knowledge and the work that I've done in kind of understanding the market and trying to drive the direction of the product, we've been able to create a platform that, from a technical perspective, is what our users want, but also in terms of what it needs to do in the market and deliver to our customers, has been the right solution for them. So I definitely say that's a key point. Make sure you've got those two elements, the sales and product strategy, but also the tech side of it as well.
Tell me, generic question here, but as someone who has always struggled with, let's say, tech people, and not just tech people. I think this goes a little bit back to the comment I made earlier about people having blind faith in their accountants and their lawyers, etc. One of the things I always talk about is the fact that I think it's super important to have as much knowledge of every specific area of your business as possible, so that people can't pull the wool over your eyes. And one area I see it in all the time when we're lending is owners and directors of businesses where we'll be working through their accounts and bank statements, go to them to ask them a question about something that's come up, and we just get de facto referred to to their external accountant or FD saying, I don't deal with the figures, I don't understand that, speak to my accountant about it. And obviously, when I'm talking to businesses or advising people in general, I always talk about what an absolutely loose statement that is, to not have at least a high level understanding of your accounts. I'm not saying you necessarily need to be qualified to be able to build them up from the ground upwards, but you've got to be able to understand the general principles. But I guess one of the problems with tech is very similar to accounts, but I'd say probably even potentially deeper, is it's so easy to get waffled and have the wool pulled over your eyes. When you talk about like SEO and pay-per-click, even, never mind developing websites, and as a layman, you really haven't got a clue. What kind of advice have you got to people who are, because tech is such a massive part of any business now that I guess most businesses who want to scale or to go with the times need to bring some kind of tech element in. How do you know if you're getting spanked or not?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Matt. From a tech perspective, it's where your recruitment process is so important. So when you go through the process of hiring a developer, and like I said earlier, there's a lot of developers out there. They all claim to have different specialties. They all claim to be the best developer that you're ever going to meet, and they're all wonderful, fantastic at their job. You've got to make sure that when you bring that person along for the interview process, you've got a robust process which identifies the skills that they think they've got, the skills they tell you they've got, and a way for you to test and check that that's actually the case. So we have a range of testing in place that we put our candidates through to make sure that we can identify that the things they're telling us about what they're good about are actually true. And I think for us, that's worked well in respect of making sure that when a developer does get to the end of that interview process, we've got as much information about them as possible to make us confident that that person is the right person for the job. Now, you're still going to make mistakes. Ultimately, Matt, in any business, people are going to pull the wool over your eyes at some point, and you're going to hire some people that you'll go 2 months later, damn, that was the wrong choice. But I think if you've got that robust recruitment process across the whole business, especially in the tech side of things, then that's the best place you can be at the outset.
Now, you've built this business. I think you're from a Bournemouth base. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, our main office is down in Bournemouth.
So that the whole team's down there, is it, or is that just yourself?
So we've got about 30 people down here in Bournemouth. We've got about 12 people out on the road, and interestingly, we've actually got a bunch of developers out in Toronto in Canada.
So I guess quite topical now. Then dealing with a remote workforce. I mean, it's obviously something you've done up to now anyway with the Toronto side of things. What tips have you got for people who are getting thrown in at the deep end now, having to manage their workforce, remotely, never been equipped with the tools and techniques to do it? I mean, have you struggled initially, with that concept, and have you found some good ways to manage it?
So I think from an operational perspective, we're really lucky because, given the kind of the banks and people that we deal with, we have to have disaster recovery policies in place. So for us, making the shift to moving 50 people to work from home was quite an easy thing to do. The challenge comes culturally, as you say, Matt. How do you motivate and how do you keep people engaged when they're not seeing each other anymore? They've got their kids at home with them, got their partner at home with them. They've got a whole load of new challenges to face. I think the key thing I'd say is probably twofold. Number one, as a leadership team and as a board, as a senior management team, you should be over communicating with your people right now. So all of our leadership teams are having regular communications with their colleagues. They're talking to them on a daily basis. We've also got a head of people who make sure she speaks to every single member of our business once a week, just to check in with them. And I think that's designed really to give people the opportunity to, if they need it, search for us to provide them some further information about how things are going with the business, how secure or not their job may be. And we're lucky that all of our people's jobs are secure, so that's great. And also just to give them that touch point to make them feel that, if they need a bit of extra help, a bit of extra support, need a day off because they're struggling with childcare, whatever that might be, we can accommodate that. I think the second thing I'd say is, if you've got a strong culture in your business and you've got values, now's the real time to make sure that you're maintaining that culture and you're living those values, whatever they may be. We have a number of values across the business that apply to us there, making sure we always deliver, making sure that we're doing the things that we say we're going to do. And we've reiterated to the team during this time that those values are still holding true for us. We still want to make sure that all the things we say we're going to do for our customers, we're going to keep doing.
Do you think that when this is over, you will all go back to the office as normal as you left, or do you think it's kind of opened your mind a bit to the fact that you could have a partially remote UK workforce as well as a Toronto team?
I think we had flexible working in place prior to this crisis to an extent, and clearly we had the guys in Toronto as well. I think this will encourage us to look to extend that flexible working policy, as I think it will do for every business in the UK where this has been successful. I think we've certainly seen across our IT team here in the UK that this has been a great exercise for them. They're perfectly capable of working from home on a regular basis. We like having people in the office because it's that sense of community, that sense of working as a team. But yeah, I think our working practice, along with everybody else's, will change over time through this.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've almost become, I guess a self what's the word, appointed advocate for the concept of working from home, remote offices, distributed workforce, etc. And I'm someone who was so against anyone not being almost like chained to their desk. I mean, for 20 years, I've thought that is the only way, because I've just been taken advantage of left, right, and centre by anyone who I've allowed to work outside of the office. But completely got my head around it now, and I think, I mean, our lease just coincidentally is up at the end of June anyway, and we will definitely not be going back into a long-term lease physical office space. We'll be going back to a serviced environment. We'll definitely be having some flexibility with our existing employees in terms of work from home, work from the office, and I've now completely got my head around the fact that we've really got access to a global talent pool. And I guess for someone like yourself, running a tech business, I mean, obviously you've got the guys in Toronto anyway, but it gives you fantastic access to people the world over, which is paramount for tech, isn't it?
It does, yeah. I mean, if you look at your, when you're a small business and you're growing and you're competing in the market that we were competing, for example, where you're competing against some very big businesses for talent, you've got to find ways to differentiate your proposition as an employer. And one of the things increasingly, especially now, that people are going to look for is, okay, what's your flexible working policy? Can I work from home 1-2 days a week? Do I just have core hours between, let's say, 10 and 2? And can I come and go a bit more in between that? I think that's a great way now to differentiate your business and help you recruit the people that you're going to want to recruit if you're not necessarily paying the top money that perhaps people in London might be paying.
Cool. Well, I think that's a happy note for us to finish on, rather than the doom and gloom of the UK property market right now. So I just want to say, thanks a lot for taking the time out to be with us. I'm sure you're busy and inundated with a whole manner of new problems, James. But it's been great to have you here, and thanks for helping me test my new tech.
You did well, Matt. You did well. Worked perfectly.
Well, I don't know it's recorded yet. But thank you very much, James. Thanks.
Thanks a lot. Take care.
Right, you don't have to go now, but I will cut it at that point, assuming it worked, mate. I'm just going to press. I'm just going to press end broadcast. Thanks, by the way, if anyone's still watching on, it says in my little thing that we've still got people watching on YouTube and Facebook. So thank you very much, guys. Forgive me learning on the job. So